Good evening, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of The World Where We Live. Once again, for the third week in a row now, John, we're in lockdown and we're doing it via Zoom, which may be good for all your crazy work meetings and stuff like that you're having working from home at the moment, but it certainly isn't very suitable for podcasting. But
I think it
anyway,
does give us one sort of advantage, though, in that we're actually looking at the camera instead of looking at each other at this time.
oh yes, of course. But yeah, so I've already mentioned it because you can't not mention it. It's been such an integral part of our lives for the past 3 weeks. But I don't want to talk about COVID tonight. And I was actually watching the news over the last week, trying to find anything significant that we could talk about instead. But I wasn't able to find anything. So I guess here we are. We're going to have to do that, aren't we?
I think it's kind of been all-consuming, the fact that we're all locked down and shut away from everybody else and can't go and do anything, and literally prisoners in our own homes, as Jacinda said today in her 4 p.m. briefing. Even under level 3, remember, it's not freedom. You're actually all prisoners in your own homes of the New Zealand government at the moment. And that is a pretty unacceptable position to be having in what is supposedly supposed to be a free Western nation.
Well, we've all seen the memes, haven't we? Level 3 is the same as level 4, except you can order takeaways. That's pretty much it. There's still all the restrictions, all of the protocols that have to be followed. A lot more work will happen, and a lot of unessential folk will be able to go back to work, but not all of them. And yeah, just in terms of our personal experiences, it's been pretty quiet at work lately, but just having to but so much more focus on sanitizing everything and cleaning everything, and of course reducing person-to-person contact, and it can become very taxing, especially for those of us who like to be social and like to interact with people, to have to do that. And yeah, I'd imagine quite a lot of people are doing it pretty tough, having to follow all of these protocols.
It certainly is very tough for a lot of people, particularly those who are a bit more extroverted and social, as you point out. And it is really not doing particularly good wonders for anyone's mental health at this stage. I'm in a very fortunate position that since I work from home anyway, things really haven't changed all that much for me personally. But I am aware of my friends who work in hospitality or work in retail or any of those kind of roles who can't go into work and have now been sitting around for 2 weeks with nothing to do except watch Netflix. And I know exactly what that feels like because I was stuck in quarantine for 5 weeks just recently. So I know exactly what that kind of pressure is. So I'm kind of used to it. But I think what is really important to know is today in Jacinda's briefing, she mentioned how many hundreds of cases there were. I think we're up to 300 something cases, something in that kind of realm anyway. But no deaths. No one's dying from this because everybody can get the medical treatment that they need. And I think there are maybe 20, 30 people in ICU, maybe a bit more than that, it might be 50 in ICU, all getting the treatment they need. No one's dying. And we are locked down and losing all of our freedoms for a disease that isn't killing anyone. In fact, I believe there was one death. And I think this is very telling. When Ashley Bloomfield was asked about the one death that was a result of the vaccination, in the recorded YouTube video of that press conference, his answer has been cut off by the Ministry of Health. You can obviously clearly see the cut. It starts at 14:25 when the question is asked, and then his answer is cut off halfway through it. And from what I understand, this is because the actual answer to the question was that woman died from complications due to comorbidities that resulted from known causes of death from the vaccination. But that's really not the point. The point is, why is the Ministry of Health editing press briefings when they upload it to YouTube? They shouldn't be editing any of their content at all. I thought this was supposed to be an open and transparent government, but apparently it is not.
Well, considering it's a bit disingenuous, obviously, but it's also a bit hypocritical of them to do so, because you know, we know how angry they get and how they smear anybody who questions this official narrative as a conspiracy theorist and a wacko or anything like that. But if they're the ones who are going to be editing and suppressing parts of their own press conferences and video and audio from it, then realistically, how is it so abhorrent for people to want to ask questions and to question the narrative when they're not being upfront about it?
It really isn't. And I think more and more people are making those kind of questions. It'd be nice to see the media get on board with this a little bit more and ask some a bit harder questions to the Prime Minister and Ashley Bloomfield about what is going on, how long we're going to have to stay locked down in this seemingly never-ending lockdown, what alert levels are going to be, when are we going to actually get our freedoms back, and who are you to take our freedoms away in the first place? You don't own us. Our freedoms don't come from you. That is an incredibly Marxist perspective to take, that all your freedoms and rights all are stem from the government. That is not true. That is not the way things are. Our rights and freedoms are inalienable to us, and you cannot alienate us from those rights and freedoms. Yet here we are, not quite as bad as Australia, admittedly, being forced into never-ending lockdowns over a disease that doesn't kill anyone. Not even as many people as die from influenza in every given year, which, by the way, has also dropped to zero because we're locking down. So my next question really is this going to be the status quo? Is this going to be the new normal for every single winter that we have from here on out? Are we going to lock down over the flu? Are we going to lock down over whatever the next strain of COVID is for next year? It's never going to stop. And for those people out there that are saying, oh, but there are so many cases. I don't care about cases. No one cares about cases. The only thing we care about is it killing people? Because everyone's got herpes, pretty much. If you had a cold sore, you've got herpes. Why don't we lock down over that? Because herpes doesn't kill anyone. And this disease is proving that it also doesn't really kill anyone. And we have adequate medical staffing and facilities to help those people who actually need treatment.
I think we deviate quite a bit over how dangerous we consider COVID to be. However, I will say this, you're absolutely right in that it is certainly not sustainable to have never-ending lockdowns again and again and again for God knows how long, just when we have a whole lot of cases. It is completely unsustainable. Oh heck, I'm starting to talk like a Marxist now. I'm using sustainable, you know, all these buzzwords are coming out. They've got me, but probably not in the way that it's usually used. But anyway, enough about Marxism. We talk about that a bit too much, don't we? But
yeah,
look, I think
never talk about it too much.
even the WHO have come out themselves and said that lockdown can only be used as a last resort. You can't just keep doing this. I hope we can eliminate the Delta variant of COVID in New Zealand. However, look, if this is our future, if we are going to keep locking down whenever the cat gets let out of the bag, which if you look at, just imagine that this is a perfectly normal accident. If you're going to try and stop a virus from getting out into the community, but we're still going to keep the borders partially open and allowing people with said virus to come to New Zealand, there is going to be a breach. Sure as night follows day. There are too many factors that could go wrong. And every time we have one, no, we cannot survive this. The economy can't survive this. People can't survive this. I haven't seen the suicide rates for last year and up till now compared to the normal levels. If you have, please let me know. But look, the implications for people's mental health, for the stress and the anguish that it causes, and also when you talk about millions of dollars of damage to the economy, that hurts people too. A lot of people's well-being.
Billions, mate.
People
Billions.
talk about the economy as if it's completely separate to social well-being. You have economic focused policies and you have social focused policies, but the two are inextricably related. You have economic problems, it causes a massive amount of personal suffering as well. And we can't keep doing this. We
No,
really can't.
that's exactly right. Like those two things are inextricably linked. And the reason for that is people need jobs and income and money and resources and time to be able to interact with their local communities and to be able to do things and be able to go away on holiday or buy the things that they need, buy food, buy clothes, buy furniture, decorate their houses. So if the economy is brought to an absolute standstill, which it is at the moment, it is going to cause massive problems. And the next biggest thing that I always talk about is the massive amount of inflation that is going to result as a result of these lockdowns. Because instead of paying people to be productive, our productivity is dropped to zero, and we're paying people to sit around and do nothing. And obviously do have to support the people who can't go to work. They've got to be able to pay their rent and buy food and water and electricity and those very basic things. So no problem with support there. But that is an inevitable economic consequence. And I think this is probably a good time to get back into our favorite subject of white knighting for Mike Hosking, who today pointed out in his article that we would have to, over the last quarter of the year, maintain an average growth rate of more than 9% for the government's treasury predictions to be true. And since this next month, maybe month and a half, is basically going to be negative because there's no one working, how exactly are we going to recover into those percentages? Where are you going to get the money from, Grant? Like, honestly, what are you doing?
Well, we know where Grant gets the money from. He borrows it. And
Printing.
this is, well, we've touched on this a few times before, but you know, this happens every single time the Labour Party are in power. It happened with David Lange, happened with Helen Clark, is happening with Cindy right now. They have to borrow an enormous amount of money to fund all of their social policies. Then National comes along. Remember, John Key took over in 2008, right after the Great Recession, and they were absolutely chastised for the next 9 years for not investing, you know, what is it? Social investment, not doing enough of that. What a lot of the detractors fail to tell you is that they didn't have any money after that. Labour had spent it all, borrowed an enormous amount of money. And look, unless we increase productivity, which we're not going to, because in New Zealand, we're happy for an enormous number of people to not be productive, and we're happy to fund them to do that. That's seen as a basic human right by some people, fair enough. But the rest of us can't work hard enough to increase productivity. And a lot of this, you can get into all of these sort of Orwellian kind of nonsense and spin and whatnot. But at the end of the day, when National take over next, if it's the Great National Act Coalition, they will have no money to work with, and it will not be their fault that you don't see many social investment so-called policies, because Labour will have gotten rid of all the money.
I have to say, I really do like the ACT Party policies and what they're going to do in the future when ACT inevitably comes to power as the third most powerful political party and hopefully overtakes National. That would be my goal. However, we'll see what happens. But I think what you need to do is reduce all these social spending programs and kind of what National says, focus on building infrastructure, facilitating people's lives. That's what the government is supposed to be there for, is to facilitate those things which are natural monopolies and public goods so that everybody can get on with their lives while the government stays the hell out of it. I did think it was quite funny that you mentioned David Lange just before, because I was going on a walk this morning for my daily bit of exercise, and I walked past a guy who turned around and said, "I can smell the COVID on your breath," thinking it was a little bit of a David Lange there. I may have remarked something quite rude back in response.
Oh boy. Well, He still has his fans, old Longy, doesn't he? My goodness. He
Well,
certainly left the country in quite a mess that still isn't really, we haven't really recovered from it, but hey.
he pales in comparison to what is going on at the moment.
Oh, certainly, but that's only our sort of grandchildren who are going to put up with that. So it really doesn't matter. Why should we worry, right?
Well, that's what I keep telling people all the time when I talk to them about this topic. It's like, well, do your kids own a house? Probably about half of them say their kids don't own a house. It's like, well, if their kids do own a house, what about your grandkids? Do they honestly, or any of your kids now that don't own a house, do they honestly think they're ever going to be in the position where they can own their own property and actually be responsible for their own lives and actually have control of their lives? The answer is always no. They just don't think they can. And
Well, it doesn't matter. The state will provide them with a home anyway. They want to do that now. They want to make a lot of those state houses rent to buy. And damn it, if people cannot work for a home, the government will provide it for them. Wonder what that's called.
I'm a lot less opposed to renting to own a state house than I am any other sort of system that has been proposed, or just giving people state houses that live in perpetually. I'm less opposed to the state building houses and then allowing lower income families, or I don't know, people like myself, to rent a house and then eventually buy it over time. I would prefer that to the current system where you take your whole Kiwi saving and life savings and then you have to go and buy your first home. But honestly, if we're really going to go down this route, I say what I always say about all these plans. They're much better left if the government is not involved at all. It'd be much better if everyone just went into the open market to buy a house or not buy a house, get the loans they can or cannot get, and then move into that situation. And if the goal is to buy a house, then you are going to have to save up a deposit for it. But the reason why none of our generation is ever looking to own a home is because of the ridiculous rate of inflation we've seen, not only in Labour governments, but in national governments as well, over the last 30, 40 years.
Oh, look, absolutely. I think the modern sort of idea with rent to buy is basically using benefit money. It's not people working to buy state houses, which was, by the way, the original idea for them. There's still quite a few that are at MOTAT now, which belong to the workers at the railways and things like that. So they were bought by people, so built by the government for government workers who were operating the equipment and the infrastructure of the time, and that was the idea, that people who were working would buy them. Of course, not everybody did do that. Not everybody worked to own their state houses, and that's how we got sort of 5, 6, 7 generations of the same families living on the dole for a very long time indeed. But
it's the joke that I always make about the difference between socialism and communism, which is that at least under communism, everybody has to work.
Yeah, fair enough. But look, if there's any sort of takeaway that we can give people about this one, I'm glad we branched out from COVID a little bit. My goodness.
Well, it's sort of vaguely interrelated. I thought there's sort of interesting economic topics to talk about as well. That's what I'm most worried about, as you're probably all aware, is the impending economic boom that is coming with interest rates going up in banks, and the Reserve Bank is going to have to put up interest rates at some stage. And when that happens, the whole house of cards is going to fall over, because it's a giant Ponzi scheme, and our kids and our grandkids are the ones that are going to suffer for it.
So you mean I shouldn't try and buy a house after all?
I think you should wait for the pending economic collapse and pick up the mortgagee sales.
I can do that.
Hold on to your cash and assets right now. Make sure that you've got a diversified portfolio in a lot of different areas, because something's going to collapse. We don't quite know where it's going to collapse yet. But when it does, it is going to be the worst depression we have ever seen in all of recorded human history. The stock market in the S&P 500 index is currently 3 times what it normally is at this peak, and we are right on that borderline of the S&P 500 being at the level where it has been for every single crash we've had all the way back to the Great Depression. So every single line, we're now above that point. And when it crashes, it's going to crash big. So you want to be diversified. You want to have very little money in fiat currency because those things are going first. You want to make sure that you hold on to a little bit of hard assets, sort of either like Bitcoins, Ethereum, gold, silver, those kind of things. Keep some wealth there. If you've got a property, you're probably all right because it will go up with the rate of inflation. If you've got food production, or you can hold on to and store food in that kind of way, that's probably a good idea too, because you're going to need that because you can't eat gold and you can't eat cash. But we are in for big problems in the future, in the very near future. So I would wait for that. If you're looking to buy a house now, don't. It's the top of the inflationary market right now. If you can possibly hold off, just wait a little bit, and we'll see the massive inflation crash happen. Hopefully, the bottom will fall out of the market and encourage people to not just build and invest in houses and invest in actually productive assets such as themselves. And we'll stop this house building. There's another thing that people have raised with me as well. And the other concern is that people are very worried that we're going to become a nation of nothing but house builders because the prices for property are so high. And we risk losing diversity in our economy because it literally won't be worth doing anything else other than building and owning houses. I think that's a valid concern. I don't know exactly how that's going to come to fruition, but it certainly looks like we're heading that way with tons more people being pushed into trades. However, what I would say about that is even if that is the case, and we do end up becoming a nation of house builders for a few years, at the very least, everyone who's involved with that industry has a whole bunch of really good, really solid, transferable, functional, productive skills. So I can see a lot worse things happening than that.
Oh, of course. And if they're going to regulate the agriculture industry out of existence and keep the borders closed for so long that we can't get any money from tourism, then yeah, it'd be good to have something else that's lucrative.
That would be nice. Tourism, of course, is ultimately the best example of a very green, clean, renewable activity. So we need to get back to that. It doesn't really damage the environment. The people who do it in certain environments, walking tracks, bungee jumps, skydiving, those kind of things, tend to look after their environments because that's where they get their income from. And it has a continuous source of new people wanting to come and spend money doing those activities. So we do need to get back into the tourism, particularly if we're going to kill off any resource exploitation and farming. Although I have seen the Groundswell Project has made some progress on that, and the government has walked back some of their policies around that, but they're still going to keep going that direction.
Oh, of course, they'll never stop going in that direction, for sure. In some ways, I'm sure they're very glad that they could put another lockdown on because there was going to be an even bigger groundswell protest. And as soon as we're out, of course, there's going to be more. And it'll keep going until they're booted out of office for generally not listening to those sorts of people who have very legitimate concerns about their policies.
Hopefully. Did you see the really
dream,
big win for... You can. It's only in your dreams, though. But did you see the very big win for ACT this week?
No, what was that?
So I don't know if you saw it in the paper, but the under level 4 lockdown, there was a provision that allowed exemptions for Maori customary fishing rights. Did you see that one?
Yes, I did actually.
Yeah, so ACT petitioned the government very hard over that and has made them change the rules. So now that all fishing activities are allowed under level 4, not just Maori customary fishing rights, because that would be racist, and what is now applies to everyone applicably. So now you don't have to be Maori to go fishing. You can be any Kiwi and you can go fishing. And that is a win for ACT, pushing that policy through the Labor government, saying don't be bloody racists.
Well, that is, it's ridiculous and racist. And I didn't know the virus could differentiate between races. I didn't know COVID could say, oh, he's Maori, I'm not going to attack that guy.
It seems the virus is a lot more intelligent than we gave it credit for.
Yeah, well, we'll need some smarter policies to fight it, that's for sure. Hey,
Well, that would be
thank
nice.
you all. Thank you all for tuning in tonight and all of our economic discussions that thankfully weren't completely dominated by that virus that we keep hearing so much about.
Yeah, it's been actually quite a good chat, but I think that's probably long enough and we'll just call it right there. So thank you all very much for watching and hopefully we'll catch you again next week. Take care, stay safe.
See you later.